Hello, my name is Jason. I'm going to start making some videos on Visual Studio and Visual C Sharp. Hopefully by watching my videos you'll be able to learn Visual C Sharp and also learn a little bit about Visual Studio. Should be fun and exciting, and if you're interested in learning C Sharp I can recommend it. It's a brilliant language to learn. Now I should just say at this point in time I am also still learning myself. I'm actually preparing for an MTA exam, which is the Microsoft Technology Associate Qualification, which I'm getting through my school for free, since the school have paid for it, which is brilliant of them. So if you're interested in that, you can look at those Microsoft exams. I'm doing the Software Development Fundamentals course. So this video is going to be about Visual Studio, just a very quick overview of what Visual Studio is and what it does. So basically Visual Studio is a piece of Microsoft software which you have to buy, but I can get it for free through my school. There's an express version if you don't want to pay for it, which I also recommend downloading. But basically this is the software which you're going to be creating your applications in. It supports a variety of languages such as Visual C Sharp, Visual Basic, .NET, Visual C++, even JavaScript and HTML. So it's a very powerful piece of software which you can use to write applications. And a lot of it's, as the name suggests, visual, so you don't need to do coding to determine how the application looks, but of course you are going to need to do coding in order to make the applications function. So you're going to open up Visual Studio. Now I don't know which version you have. I have a variety here that I'm going to be using. I'm using Visual Studio Premium 2013 at the moment, and I'll be showing you 2008 and 2010 a bit later on. 2012 is very similar to 2013, so if you're on 2012, just follow what I'm doing on 2013 and you should be fine. So you're going to get something that looks a bit like this, and you're going to be thinking, okay, so how can I create an application? You're going to see Start, New Project, Open Source Control. So we're going to want to create a new project. You can either just click here or you can go to File, New Project. Now for the first time you open up Visual Studio, after you've installed it, it's going to ask you which language you want to use. It doesn't matter which one you can choose later. I set Visual C Sharp as my default language here on 2013, but if I want to go to Visual Basic, I can just click up here and I can create a Visual Basic application. Now this box is going to look the same in pretty much every single version of Visual Studio, going right back to visualstudio.net, which came out in 2002. I'm using Visual Studio 2013 here, and we can see that this version of Visual Studio supports .NET Framework 4.5.1, which as of 2014 is the latest. Visual Studio 2012, I believe, supports 4.5, 2010 4, 2008 3.5, 2005 might be 3 or 2.5. I'm not entirely sure, but this is going to look the same in pretty much every single version of Visual Studio. So here we have our different types of project we can have. So we can have Windows Form application, which is just yours. This is a Windows Form application. This is here. So it's just basically a window with some assets on it. WPF application, which is much the same. Console application, which looks a lot like the command prompt, which I'll just bring up here. So you're going to have an application which runs inside the command prompt. Don't worry about all of this. Now, if you want to create Windows 8 apps, such as, let's take the weather app for example. So if you want to start creating apps a bit like this for Windows 8, optimized for touch and all of that good stuff, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to Windows Store and create an app like this, blank app XAML. Now I'm going to be making some videos on all of this a bit later on, so keep an eye out for those if you're interested in that. But for the time being, we're going to stick with Windows Form. Now I should just say that the Windows Store applications I think came out of Visual Studio 2012 or 2013, and you do need to apply for a developer license, which is free. But if you're on 2010 or older, you won't be able to code Windows Store apps. You'll only have Windows, and you may not even have WPF application. But it doesn't really matter because Windows Form is fine. Now here we're going to have the name and we're going to have the solution name. And you're going to have the location of the folder, which I'm just going to leave as this for the time being, because that's where I've been saving all my recent projects to. And we're just going to call this test, and then we're going to click OK. Now, we're just going to wait a minute or two whilst it creates a project, and you're going to get something like this. So choose a source control system for the new project, Team Foundation or Git. I'm just going to go with Git. I'm going to click OK. Now, Visual Studio is going to look something a bit like this. You're going to have a form, and then you're going to have all of these things up here, and it looks pretty much the same in the older versions too. Here's Visual Studio 2008 on Windows Vista. And this is Visual Studio 2010 running on Windows 7. As you can see, it looks pretty much the same. So let's go back to Visual Studio 2013 on Windows 8.1, and you're going to go up to the toolbox, which is here. Now I'm just going to dock this here. Just going to dock it so it's always on display. Now what these are the assets which we're going to put on our form. For example, we're going to have buttons and checkboxes and combo boxes and basically things like that which go on our form. Now, in order to code these, we're just going to double click, and there you go. You're going to see in C# it's going to be private void and then all of this lot. And then we're just going to write a very simple bit of code in here for the time being, just to demonstrate how this works. So build, and then we're going to go build solution. Okay, build started. Good. Okay, now we're going to click start, and then we're going to have our form 1, click button, and the message box is showed. So that's a very, very basic introduction to the some assets. Now, if you go over here and click on the properties panel, we can see, I'm just going to dock that back because I like it like that. So we can see the button is selected, and then we have all of these options which we can enable for it. Now, by default, the button text is button 1, but we can change it to something such as press me, and then as we can see, the text changes on the button to press me. Now, the fore color is the color of the text, and we can change this, and now it's red. And we can change the font, and really the best thing to do is just to have a little bit of a play with this and see what you think. Obviously, you can click on the assets and resize them a bit like that, and that's basically what that is. So you just click on a control or an asset or whatever you'd like to call it, a tool, and then we can change all of its properties here. And the same can be done for the checkbox and also the combo box, and also for the form window itself, actually. So all of these options are available for you to play around with and change. So let's just call this test up here, and then, oh sorry, that's the name of the form. That's something I'll be getting onto a little bit later on. That doesn't change the, that doesn't change the name on the form up here. That changes the name in the code, but we'll be getting onto that a bit later on. This is just a video explaining how to use Visual Studio. If you actually want to change the caption of the text box, we'll just call this test, and there you go. So these are all the properties that you can use. These events we'll be getting onto a little bit later on. As we can see, for the button, the default is the click event, but there's all kinds of other events that you can use. And the Solution Explorer is also something that's quite important, which I want to go over today. So we have test, and then inside that we have all of this here. Now, the form1.designer, if we just click on it, this is basically what this does is this is the code behind all of this, but we don't need to worry too much about this right now because this is Visual Studio. But if you want to write it from scratch, there's the way to do it. And then if you go to your form 1 here, oh whoops, sorry, you click program.cs. Now this is actually what your now this is actually where the code for your program lies. So the Solution Explorer is very handy, and you're probably going to be using that an awful lot during your time in Visual Studio. This is something I'm going to go over a bit later on. So we've already gone over some very basic things, such as putting controls onto the form window, and you can also obviously resize it a bit like this as well. Okay, now in order to try and run an application before actually compiling it as an exe, you can just click start up here, And as you can see, now this is called debugging your application, which is a phrase you may or may not have come across before. Basically, the application is being run, but is not actually been saved as an exe, which you can use just yet. And as we can see, the program runs as it would, because obviously if you double click on here, you're just going to get the code for the message box, which we programmed in. That does not come as default. Oh yes, by the way, all of this stuff here, private void, button, one click, that's all there by default on Visual Studio. And so in C#, so are some of these namespaces, but you can add some other namespaces, of course, such as using system.io if you want to use file copy commands in C#. Visual Basic and C++ will be different to this. Namespaces and things like this I'm going to go over another time, but that's basically how that works, along with all of this different color text. This is all default. We can see message box is a class because it's in the cyan color, and private void is blue because it's a keyword. So when you want to actually save your application as an exe, you can go to build, and then build, and then we go to build solution. Okay, and the build is successful, and this is going to save an exe in the folder which you saved it in. So in this case, I've saved, when I created the project, I saved the files in this folder here called test, and then you go into test, bin, and then in debug, and you're going to see the exe here, which you can run, and that will run your application. So that was a very, very, very quick overview of what Visual Studio can do, and a very quick tutorial on how to use it. I'm going to be doing some C# tutorials in the future, but I thought I'd just do a very quick tutorial right now on Visual Studio, because if you don't know how to use Visual Studio, very basically, I mean, it's a lot more advanced than how I've described it here. But if you don't know how to use it, then you're not going to get very far with C# if you're coding in Visual Studio. So thank you for watching, and I hope this video was informative.